She wore a crown, but walked the night in another woman's face. She measured power not by titles, but by the hush of voices in dark alleys. Her name survived the centuries as a talisman against female ambition, Messalina. Who was Valeria Messalina really? An empress, a beauty, a calculated manipulator, or a target of a political smear? This is a story that reads like a thriller from antiquity: lust, leverage, betrayal. Listen closely. The line between truth and invention here is so thin it could cut with a quill. Aggression. Warning, this is not a sentimental tale. This is Roman politics, where desire walked hand in hand with assassination. Valeria Messalina was born into the tangled web of aristocratic lineage, a node in the vast network of imperial kinship. Her marriage to Claudius elevated her from noblewoman to Augusta. But titles never alone hold power in Rome. Power is gossip, loans, favors, and burdens of obligation. She learned these levers quickly. Imagine a palace of white marble. Candles shimmer in the lacquered eyes of statues. In one hand she held jewelry, in the other threads of influence. These were not threads for weaving, but threads of intrigue. Why did her name become the shorthand for sexual excess and political villainy? Why did ancient pens turn this single woman into an archetype of corruption? Tacitus, Suetonius, Juvenal, Pliny, the voices we inherit, paint Messalina not merely as a woman, but as the embodiment of appetite and cruelty. Their pages are stained with vivid scenes, night masks, the Sabura's alleys, competitions and brothels. But remember, their pens moved in a political climate. They wrote for audiences who loved spectacle and for time-stretched agendas. One arresting fact threaded through centuries. Pliny the Elder, not usually a teller of frivolous tales, records a competition. Messalina and a well-known prostitute wagered who could service more men in a single day. The number that haunts us? 25. Numbers become symbols. 25 turns from count to accusation. The public stops asking what happened and starts repeating what she allegedly was. History becomes a moral fable. Our task is to pry away the rhetorical husk and find the kernel of documentary truth. Rome had two faces, marble by day, muck by night. Daytime oratory in the Senate, nighttime whispers in the Sabura. And Messalina moved between these worlds. Tradition says she donned wigs, smeared soot, and under the name Lysiska slipped into brothels, not as a mere thrill-seeker, but as a listener, a collector of vulnerabilities. Why would an empress do this? Curiosity? Blackmail? A hunger for power over those who, by law, were supposed to be beneath her? The Sabura was where the city's private weaknesses pooled into a single stream. Confessions, grudges, illicit admissions, all could be overheard. For one who could listen and remember, it was a mine of leverage. Information from the gutters could become a blade in the hands of a clever ruler. Picture a strategy. You are an empress. You know the public life of every notables, their affairs, their debts, their shame. A single whisper can become your leverage. A single confession can topple a throne. The act moves beyond appetite into politics. Roman chronicles are full of instances where private desire becomes public instrument. Messalina, according to those chronicles, was no exception. Her power showed itself in quiet hands on appointments, in pressure applied to courts, in the removal of rivals. Often these operations came wrapped in gifts and honeyed words. Sometimes they came with rods and executions. Whatever the method, the verdict is blunt. Power corrupted by personal appetite becomes dangerous. Where was Claudius in all of this? The husband? The emperor? He was no romantic hero. He was a ruler with his own fears and frailties. Some accounts suggest he knew more than he appeared to, but inertia, trust, or political blindness allowed Messalina to move on the edge. The 25 men contest, the number that outlived centuries. The Lysiska disguise, a satirist's image of infiltration into brothels. The secret marriage to Gaius Silius, the pivot from rumor to treason. Arrests, sentences, and execution, the final mortal consequences of intrigue. Damnatio memoriae, Rome's legal attempt to wipe her from memory. Each of these facts is like a fingerprint on glass. Alone, a print proves only contact. History attempts to interpret the nature of that contact. Then came the moment when the game broke its strings. In 48 CE, Claudius left the city. A throne momentarily unguarded smells of danger for those who yearn for more. Messalina entered into a secret union with the consul Gaius Silius, even marrying him while Claudius stood away. For Roman society, this was treason. It was not a mere love affair, it was a political statement, visible to the watchers who kept tabs on succession. Narcissus, the freedman and secretary who served Claudius, returned with documents and whispers. Documents in imperial hands read like poison. One report became a verdict. Claudius acted. Claudius moved. The arrest was swift. Silius was taken. Messalina was confronted with choice. She was offered an honorable death, to take her life with a sword and preserve a tissue of dignity. The sword was placed in her hands. The plea for dignity was perfunctory. She failed, or refused, or hesitated. The sword entered, and with that single thrust fell more than a body. An entire constellation collapsed. The emperor signed. The Senate pronounced damnatio memoriae. Statues toppled, names erased, images burned. It was not just retribution. It was a legal satire. She never existed. Imagine the silence after the storm. Marble gardens rustled, leaves whispered, blood soaked the soil. Rome returned to routine, but the hush had changed its meaning. Some said justice was served. Others whispered that she had been eaten by men fearful of a woman who dared to seize a public instrument. Who writes history? Winners or witnesses? Who converts the personal into the political? At what point does a woman's name begin to loom larger than her actual deeds? The Messalina legend gave us more than a chronicle. It became a mirror. In it, we see a Roman society afraid of female initiative. We see the machinery of political smearing. We see rumor used as weapon. Modern historians peel back the sensationalist layers. They measure context, cross-reference testimony, and evaluate motives. What emerges? Sometimes slander, sometimes creative embellishment for an eager audience. Yet even when scholars strip away some of the salacious scaffolding, they do not entirely exonerate a woman who moved recklessly within a male-dominated and lethal political arena. The fact remains, her fall and the subsequent attempt to obliterate her memory show the scale of her perceived threat. Her name is like jagged glass, reflective and dangerous, its edges cut. She resembles a volcano, calm in appearance, but molten rumors churn beneath. Her life is a mosaic of shards, bright fragments of different tales assembled into one picture, though the choice of colors was not hers to make. What if the real Messalina never hosted orgies or staged obscene competitions? What if she used the tools available, alliances, information, seduction, as political instruments? Perhaps scandal was the language men used to describe a woman who refused to be a mere decorative appendage to power. History offers parallels. Livia, Agrippina the Younger, women who manipulated politics and whose legacies are similarly negotiated by the historians who wrote them. The difference often lay in who wrote the scripts. Compare Messalina and Caligula. People like to set them side by side, the emperor of depravity versus the empress of immorality. But while Caligula's excesses are often explained away as madness or disease, women are frequently reduced to moral landmarks, punished in story as much as by sword. This is an obvious double standard. Where then is the truth? We must accept that the complete truth is lost. We have fragments: the marriage to Silius, the execution, the damnatio memoriae. These are facts. Everything else is texture layered over facts by rhetoricians, enemies, and storytellers. History about Messalina is not a sermon on one woman's morality. It is a lesson in the power of words. Words can wound as sharply as any blade. They can erase faces as if an eraser passed over a canvas. Valeria Messalina vanished into marble and whispers. She was an empress, a legend, perhaps a victim. Rome survived her, but her name persisted. Useful, perhaps, to those who wanted to preach morality or to strike down rivals. So I leave you with a question. When we condemn figures of the past, who are we truly judging? The actors on history's stage, or the playwrights who scripted their downfall? We now descend deeper into Rome by night, where marble meets shadow and people hide their truths behind masks. Picture a narrow street, oil lamps guttering, the scent of wine and oil thick in the air. Shadows slip along walls, laughter and groans braid into one thread. In the chaos walks an unknown woman with a wig and soot on her cheeks. Her stride is not of lust, but of habit. She listens. What does she hear? Laughter, gossip, confessions, names. Which secret will grant her power? Which confession will she use as a currency? This scene is not mere lechery. It is an exploration of power. Every whisper is a coin. Coins buy fates. Now imagine an inner monologue, an artistic insertion, not a document, a voice in the night. You call me licentious? You call me a desire without limit? No. I am a tool and a blacksmith of my own destiny. I learned to hear the weak parts of men and shape them into swords. When they whisper in the dark, I take their whispers and weave a net. They come with titles, dreams, crimes, and they leave owing debts to me. Is that not power? Is not that politics? Perhaps I play dangerous games. Perhaps I set my own rules. But who gave men the authority to say how a woman at the throne should play? Return to the facts. Tacitus, Suetonius, Pliny, Juvenal, each offers a version. Who were they? Men of the elite, survivors of political mills. Their pens were not neutral. Modern scholarship tries to reclaim nuance, analyzing the intent and bias of sources, cross-checking, and contextualizing. Sometimes they find slander. Sometimes they find sensational additions for public appetite. Yet even the stripped-down Messalina is still compelling, a woman who wielded influence in a world that would mercilessly punish her for it. For the sake of format, here are compact narrative versions suited to modern platforms. A 60-second script. She is Empress by day and Shadow by night. Valeria Messalina, Rome's whispered warning. Disguises, brothels, 25 men in a day, and a secret marriage to Gaius Silius. In 48 CE, she was given a sword, and with it, the age of rumor ended. But did enemies create the story, or did she live it? History teaches this: words can kill as surely as a blade. A 90-second short. Ancient writers painted Messalina as a woman who stalked brothels under a false name and outdid prostitutes by endurance. Pliny records a tally, 25. But beneath the scandal lies the political calculus: blackmail, appointments, court removals, and then a secret marriage that looked like treason. Arrest followed. The sword finished her in the gardens. The Senate erased her name. Was she an immoral monster or a woman punished for seeking political agency? Podcast opening. Welcome. Today we talk about Valeria Messalina, empress, myth, perhaps victim. In this episode, we sift fact from fiction and ask how reputations are shaped and weaponized. Podcast outro. If you enjoyed this episode, subscribe and leave a review. Next time, Agrippina the Younger, maternal strategist or ruthless manipulator. History continues, and there's much to unpack. Ask yourself, does anything change if we learn the truth about Messalina? If her nocturnal exploits were invention, what does society lose? If her intrigues were survival tactics, what do we learn? Messalina's story is less about how low she fell and more about how society treats a woman who claims public power. Her name survives as a shard of mirror, distorted but dangerous. She was volcanic in rumor, methodical in maneuver. The mosaic of her life was assembled by many hands, and most of those hands were her enemies. If she did not organize nights of excess, she certainly used what she had. Information, alliances, sex, all were instruments of policy in an age where the public and private blurred into one another. Perhaps the scandal is less a verdict and more a verdict's packaging. There are other Roman examples: Livia and Agrippina, women whose political clout is narrated through charges of cunning and poison. Historiography often depends on who sets the ink. Men wrote the scripts, women were cast as demons or divas accordingly. Compare her to Caligula, both icons of excess, yet one's madness can be explained, the other's agency is painted as vice. This is a glaring double standard. The truth? Fragmentary. The marriage to Silius, her execution, the damnatio memoriae, these are events. Much else is rhetorical overlay. But what is undeniable is the lesson. Words wound, smear, and erase. Imagine the garden after the blade. Maturity returns to the palace. Political life resumes. Names are crossed out of ledgers. Statues fall. The empire fashions a cautionary tale. Women watching that tale learn the cost of stepping out of bounds. What do we judge when we judge Messalina? Deed, tale, or author? She vanished into marble and rumor, an empress, perhaps a villain, perhaps a victim. Rome survived. Her name did not. Or rather, it lived on in the form most useful to those in power. History is a mirror. We look in it and see not just past events, but ourselves, our biases, fears, and the mechanisms we use to control those who seek power. If you want, I will compile all source references footnoted for every claim, prepare precise timecodes for a 20-minute video edit, and create microscripts for social platforms. For now, close your eyes and picture one thing: a crown in the dark. A woman who learned to count whispers as currency, and a city that chose to erase her rather than understand her. History repeats, but it also rewrites. The most dangerous thing is not a woman's ambition, it is the story told about that ambition.